Thom Hartmann Program.
So this is interesting. The question was asked in the last hour, and I dealt with it at some length yesterday, is how appropriate is it that a member of the United States Senate is literally lobbying the head of an intelligence service of a foreign agency to do something with regard to foreign policy, in this case, helping to arm and fund ISIS, the Sunni rebels, initially and titularly against Bashar al-Assad in Syria, and then, you know, of course, the unintended consequence of that was that they became ISIS, or an offshoot of them became ISIS, which is now rampaging across Iraq. You know, to what extent is that legal or appropriate? And interestingly, in Foreign Affairs magazine, it's published by the Council on Foreign Affairs, or Council on Foreign Relations, the CFR, Hubert Humphrey, who in July of 1959 had been a member of the United States Senate for 11 years and was a member of the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, wrote an op-ed about this very topic. And he went back to the Federalist Papers. Now, the Federalist Papers, for those of you who may not remember, or didn't, you know, or attended an American public school where they no longer teach civics, the Federalist Papers, they got together in the summer of 1787 in Philadelphia and locked themselves in a room. Absolute secrecy, swore themselves to secrecy for at least 50 years. And in fact, James Madison died before they published his notes of the debate on the Constitution. And it turns out we learned many years later, I mean, almost a century later, really, historians pieced it together, that the reason the guys who wrote the Constitution did so in such utter secrecy was that the majority of them none of them were wildly wealthy, but the majority of them were what would today be called the upper middle class, the top 1%. They were people who had assets equivalent to, you know, somewhere in the neighborhood of $500,000 to $1 million in today's dollars. There were no billionaires in the room. There were no uber rich. There were none in the United States. The really, really rich in this country had all fled during the Revolutionary War, or after the Revolutionary War was lost. The Johnson family went up to Canada. Others had been here at the behest of the Crown. They went back to England. But still, they were the upper class. They were the top 10%, the top 1%. And when they wrote the Constitution, in many very substantial ways, they were betraying their own class. They were giving power to the what Jefferson referred to as the plowman and the yeoman, the farmer and the worker. Political power to the people. And putting the majority of the political power in the entire American government in Article 1 in the House of Representatives, which was elected at the most local level, congressional districts, not statewide, and elected every 2 years. So they were the most answerable. So that was 1787. They finished that Constitution. They wrote it through the summer. By September, they had a good, clean draft. Madison sent it off to Jefferson in Paris. Jefferson sent back a famous letter, I think it was in December of 1787, saying, you know, if you don't attach a Bill of Rights to this, I'm going to blow up Virginia's ratification of it. He negotiated the Bill of Rights with Madison. It got changed a little bit over time. Jefferson didn't want there to be, he wanted commercial monopolies in commerce to be banned by the Constitution. Boy, was he prescient. And there was one other thing that oh, that's right. He wanted standing armies to be banned as well. And that led to the creation of the Second Amendment, but that's a whole other thing. So then Madison and his merry band who wrote the Constitution, they had the problem of selling the Constitution to the people, because we were already the United States of America, but we were operating under the Articles of Confederacy, or Confederation, which created basically 13 nations with a giant free trade deal connecting them. That's what the Articles of Confederation were. It was sort of like an early version of the EU. And it wasn't working very well. And the states were very, very different. I mean, slavery was banned in New Hampshire, and it was openly not just the law but promoted in Georgia, et cetera. So the challenge was, how do we bring all these people together? And they thought they'd done it, but they had a hell of a sales job to do. And so Alexander Hamilton, who was the more industrialist guy, James Madison, who was a little more aligned with Jefferson, an agrarian society. I mean, keep in mind, the Industrial Revolution had not yet begun. And wrote the majority of the Federalist Papers, which were published as newspaper articles, and they were all signed by, I think, Publius. It was or anonymous. I mean, they were signed by a Latin or Greek name. But, we learned over time who wrote which ones, and so we now know. John Jay, I think, authored a couple, and George Mason might have written one. But anyhow, this series over the course of 2 years, 1787 to 1789, leading up to the ratification votes in each one of the states, where they had to have 3/4 of the states ratify the Constitution, the Federalist Papers were basically just a sales job to get people to say to their members of Congress, please vote for this Constitution. And Hubert Humphrey, in his essay in July of 1959 on the Senate and Foreign Policy, that's the title, he asked what is the role of a senator in the formulation of the United States foreign policy? The answer to this question depends on the character of the times, the issues at hand, and the senator himself. And then he quotes Federalist 64. And now, keep in mind, Federalist 64 was a sales pitch, but it was also revealing the intent of the people who wrote the Constitution, because it was written by the guy who wrote the Constitution. I don't know if 64 was written by Madison or Hamilton, but it was almost certainly one or the other. Oh, no, it was Madison. In fact, Humphrey points it out. Now, in this article, it says its unique value, says Madison, is that it proceeds with more coolness, with more system, and with more wisdom than the popular branch. Oh, 64 was written by John Jay? Okay, so he's quoting Madison, first of all, from someplace else. And he says that the unique value of the Senate, because senators are elected every 6 years. So they were the upper body, right? They were the more deliberative, more thoughtful. They could do things that might get them in political trouble that a member of the House of Representatives couldn't do. And that's why they gave the power to ratify treaties exclusively to the Senate. The House isn't involved in it. The President negotiates a treaty. He has to send it to the Senate for ratification. And this is how foreign policy is conducted in the United States. President initiates it. He's the chief foreign policy guy. He does it with the advice and consent of Congress. Congress can pass resolutions saying, President, we think you should do thus and so. But the president he's the one who negotiates the treaties, and then he gives them to the Senate. And Federalist 64 says, quote, the Constitution provides that our negotiations for treaties shall have every advantage which can be derived from talents, information, integrity, and deliberate investigations on the one hand, and that is their vision of the Senate, the senators as statesmen. And then he says, and from secrecy and dispatch, speed, on the other. That would be the president. The president can operate, he can negotiate a treaty, not out in public, there's no public debate, and he can do it, he can just call up the King of England, well, he couldn't call him up, but, send letters back and forth, or emissaries, or get together and say, okay, here's what we're going to do, what do you think? And he can work out the treaty and quickly and in secret. And then the Senate has this deliberative process. So that's how it's supposed to work, in answer to your question. 15 minutes past the hour, at least according to Hubert Humphrey.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Or Hubert Humphrey, John Jay, and James Madison. I think it's a pretty good bunch. I'll take their word for it.